Norfolk Business Show with Danny Snelling. Sponsored by MT Comms.
Right, Warren, finally got you in here. But thank you for agreeing to come in. Warren Munday, everyone.
Hello.
The world famous Warren Munday.
I wish. Infamous.
Warren, what do you do? What's your business?
So I have a company called Birchwood Energy, and effectively we're an energy contract solution for small to medium and large businesses. We sit in the gap between the client and the supplier, and we negotiate contracts on behalf of the client, ensuring, I like to use the phrase, ensuring that the client gets the energy contract that suits their needs, not the supplier getting a contract that suits their needs. So that's in essence what we do.
It's a subject I know a little bit about because, as you know, I used to sort of say that we, my company at the time, done a bit of energy broking, but all we did is gave it to someone like yourself. Yep. And you know, I know it can be a little bit of a, I guess, unethical business for some people, because I'm sure they are inclined to put the business with the supplier that gives them the most commission. But I think laws have changed recently where you've got to...
Well, luckily for us, the industry has become a little bit more... there is a lot more... I'm trying to think of the right word now, but...
less suppliers.
No, less. There are less suppliers, but it is there is more legislation based around the industry. So the road traders, and there, I'm not going to deny there was a lot of traders and a lot of consultancies out there that were making a lot of money out of clients unbeknown to them. But the legislation has come in now through Ofgem that we are tightly regulated. Commission has to be disclosed at the point of contract. We have a tendency to disclose commission when the initial conversation with the client, and then because that gets the elephant out of the wardrobe in many respects. So, and I welcome that. It's good that that our service isn't free, and I've never said that it was. And sometimes you do get the client asking the question, how do you earn your money? And so we disclose that. We earn a commission from the suppliers for the introduction and the continued supply of that energy contract, be it renewing with the existing supplier or moving it to a new supplier. We have no formal ties to any of the suppliers. We earn exactly the same commission from every supplier. And we've always based our business upon that simple ethos, really, because you can go on certain, I can't say named sites, comparison websites, and they will earn a certain more commission from one supplier that they're actively trying to push at that time. But no. Our reports that we send to the clients are based upon the price that is offered to the client via ourselves, and then we the only thing that will influence the client is whether we feel, from our experience of dealing with this supplier, whether they, and we'll have to be honest with them about it, whether they are a good fit for them. You know, sometimes some of the suppliers we've found their billing platforms are not fantastic, their customer service platforms are not fantastic, and we'll advise the clients about this.
So they might be the cheapest, but for them you might advise they don't go with the cheapest in this case because of X, Y, Z.
We found in many cases that over the years, the supply industry has opened up to lots of different and new suppliers, and they attract client base with a low price. And that always comes with a slight caveat, I feel, that when they're attracting you with a low price, there's something is going to be amiss. And usually is that after a year, if you're contracted for a year, it's going to be very difficult to move you away, because the supplier will try and keep you, and all the underhanded techniques that they can use to do that, or they'll, their billing platforms will be rubbish, to say a word, or their customer services will be rubbish, And that's what, in essence, that's the service that we provide. That whole that advice around placing your business, because the last thing you want, or one of our clients wants, is to place their business with a better price, a better contract, and then go through all the rigmarole of problems.
Yeah. So before we delve too much into the business itself and the benefits of using someone like yourself, let's roll back in time and find out a bit more about Warren. I mean, I know most things about you. I don't think I'm going to be surprised by anything you might say here, but perhaps I know you're not originally a local lad, but start from the beginning, if you will.
The beginning.
The very beginning.
Wow. So, okay, so I've luckily, I suppose, in life, I've had quite a varied career. So I started off, my father was in the Air Force, so I travelled around with him. By the age of 17, I'd spent about 9 years, I think, living in Germany with my family. And by that stage, when I left home at 17, I swore to my parents that I would never join the Air Force. And I ended up picking up a job of all things, I'd always wanted to join the police force. That was my career aspirations when I left home, and I wanted to join the Metropolitan Police. And I went to their I tried to get into as a police cadet of all things, but I failed the recruitment process. I'm sure I did. Went down to the police training college at Hendon at the time. This is back in 1982, and that makes me feel really old.
Well, you are really old.
Yeah, I know I am. But you're catching me up, Danny. Don't edit that out. And so I failed that, and I ended up falling into a job almost as a trainee fingerprint officer for the Thames Valley Police. And I worked in the fingerprint department before it had become digitalised, sifting through fingerprints, matching them up to scenes of crime pictures and all that sort of stuff. And I worked, and the Thames Valley Police was in, I can't remember, there was about 8 divisions, and they were all divided up into A to H, I think it was. And I worked on a desk that dealt with the A to D areas of the Thames Valley Police. So in the morning time, we used to get the fingerprints through from the custody suites the night before, and then they would be filed in. They used to measure the fingerprints as it's really boring, but there are a couple of different types of fingerprints. There's a swirl, and it's almost like an arch. And no one fingerprint is exactly the same.
Oh, really? It's funny that.
And so they used to mark them with different points within the fingerprint. I think they still use that, but it's very digitalised now. And then we would do the marking and then score them against any seat crimes that were out there that hadn't been solved and all that sort of stuff, and spend our days doing that. And then so I did that for about, I think it was.
But you were a proper copper then?
No, that was a civilian.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that was a civilian attached to the
I see.
The Thames Valley Police. So yeah, that was a good job. But it was going, and I think I had a hankering to move. And I'd left home at that stage. I was 17, of all things, I rented a room from a milkman. Of all things. And he decided to move to Canada, and it left me a little bit in the stuck. So I decided to, at that time, I went and applied to the Thames Valley Police to join. And I also went down to the recruitment office in the RAF and decided to apply there as well. And it just so happens that, I was the RAF were quicker recruiting me than the police. I'd got through all the selection procedure with the police, and they were just taking up references, which was pretty much nailed. They were going to offer me a place, and it just so happens that the RAF offered me a place sooner. And I was at that stage in my life where I needed to move on with the accommodation side, and I took the offer with the RAF. And I haven't really regretted it, because then I joined the Air Force and I was in there for 14 years, and I loved it. I've always said I recommend the military service to anybody. It makes you the person you are more than anything. I really enjoyed my time. I was lucky enough that it was in the services at the time when we travelled all over the world, and that spent another 4 years out in Germany, which I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a very male-orientated, dominated environment, and it was before the days of when the WRAF or the women in the Air Force had to leave it when they got pregnant, and just all those sort of strange things, which has all changed now. And I've friends that have just left the Air Force, and they're saying how different it is. You know, after 40 odd years, I would have been in 40 years if I'd still staying in. But I left that after I did 14 years, and I was lucky enough to.
It's me. Why is that vibrating?
So I was lucky enough to leave on voluntary redundancy, and at the time I was married, and we had a house out up in the north of Scotland, and I was serving out in Hong Kong at the time for the Army Legal Services at a place called HMS Tamar, which was based on Hong Kong Island. So that was again, it was a very different job, and I was lucky enough to get that job. I think within the HMS Tamar there was only 15 or 16 RAF personnel there, so we were quite a different bunch of people to what the army was. Am I allowed to tell you?
You know, just carry on. I'm just going to turn this off because it doesn't seem to want to shut up. But
it's probably from China, because that's.
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah. I would probably. I was going to say, before we were rudely interrupted, what a good way to see the world, though.
Oh God, just,
yeah. You're getting paid. You know, it must just be a phenomenal.
I think at that time as well, we were very lucky in the fact that when we went overseas, the infrastructure was all there. I went to a place called RAF Bruggen, and there was nearly 4,000 people, 4,000 servicemen and their wives and families stationed there at that time. So it was quite an environment of British people there. And at that time, I think the military out in Germany was quite an industry in many respects. So, and we got paid extra money to live over there as well. And then they threw other things like tax. Everything was tax-free for the British or the military out there. You could buy cars tax-free. You got petrol tokens, so petrol was tax-free. I remember once somebody said to me, I bought a new car out there because, again, it was tax-free. Somebody said to me, how many miles to the gallon do you get, Warren? And I went, I have no idea, because, when you're paying 30p for a litre of petrol, you don't worry.
No.
And then when we went to Hong Kong, again, we got paid an inordinate local overseas allowance to live out there. Ironically, it was supposed to be for, because out there it's very traditional British colony, based upon the British colony, and they used to pay you an extra to have a maid in your property, and the accommodation you had a maid's accommodation attached to it. And a lot of the Filipinos out there they used to work for you. And again, when you think about it, and we never had a maid because I used to send the money home and save it. But when we were out there, the amount of Philippines ladies that were out there doing that job was just phenomenal. Hong Kong I liked it and I didn't like it. It was just a big city, and I'm not particularly a big city person.
No, but I mean, you don't have to live there, do you? It's like great for a few years, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Before the novelty wears off. But yeah, I think they should bring back what do they call it?
National service.
National service. Yeah.
You see, I'm a big advocate of the military in that respect, but I don't think in today's environment you could conscript.
No, you couldn't bring it. They couldn't, no way. But it would be. They should make it more of an option,
Ironically, when I was leaving, I had the BBC News on, and they were just talking about, the Korean. There's a band, what do they call them? Bebop or something like that. Whatever, big Korean band, and they're famous all over the world. And 3 of their members are currently serving in the they're conscripted into the national service, and they were just leaving today, and all of the fans were there. But it's just a different culture in the fact that they were happy to do that. Can you imagine in today's
Yeah,
culture
God, yeah.
if you got our kids to do?
Yeah. No, I don't think it should ever be made compulsory, but I do think they should promote it more, offer pay to do that, offer good pay to do that, and just make it an option, because at the moment they don't consider that as an option, and it doesn't have to be for long, just a year or two, and think of the education they'd get from doing that,
Because today aren't they announcing the defence spending review, and I think some of the monies that we spent on accommodation for the services. And I remember back in the day when we first had, like when I lived in the single accommodation, I was stationed at a place called Lossiemouth in the north of Scotland. And when you look back and you think to yourself, my God, we'd lived in porter cabins at one stage because they were renovating the accommodation, and it was called Swift Plan accommodation. It was single man rooms. You never used to have to take your key because you could just bang on the door and it would open. And we thought they were luxury compared to the 8-man rooms that you were supposed to be living in.
Yeah. But of course that wouldn't be like that today. They
No.
probably all need their own room. They have to be a certain size.
They'd have to have en suite.
Yeah. So forces. And then at what point in life did you finish that, or did
I was. I was 30 years old, and the military, the Air Force, was going through what's called options to change, and it had done a tranche before, and then while I was out in Hong Kong, it came up again, and they were offering early redundancy for people that applied for it. And I thought to myself at that stage, well, I'm better off leaving when I'm 30 and looking for a job in civilian life with all, hopefully, what I can offer. So I took the option, and I remember the day that we were all told to stay in our offices if you'd applied. And I was sitting on the floor in my office, and I heard the tip-tap of this army colonel coming around the corridor. And he had segs. Do you know what I mean by segs? They're like in these
metal bits.
Yeah, in his shoes. And as he walked around, I could hear these segs. And he got to my office and he said to me, "Here's your letter." And I went, "Thank you very much." And I opened the letter as he was walking away, and then I explained in some profanities, "Yes, you." To which he turned down and said,
"We can swear on here."
Okay,
apparently.
Yeah, and to which he says, "I'll take it's the news you wanted." I went, "Too fucking right."
Nice.
So I so I left in the September of 96, and my missus and my wife at the time was not very happy, because obviously I was more excited about the new adventure, and she was more worried about the mortgage we had to pay. So I came back to the UK, and I knew, I just felt I had the confidence that I would get a job. And I applied, and I was applying away for jobs. And then I got offered a friend of mine who was at Lossiemouth at the time, worked for the Murray Council, and he worked in their payroll department. And he said to me, "There's a job going." So I got offered that job at the same time as I had applied for an assistant bursar's job at Gordonston School. And the controller, or whatever, the bursar at the time, said to me, walked into his office, and he said to me, I'm just going to offer you the job, Warren, because you're an ex-sergeant from the Air Force. I know exactly what I'm getting. Do you want the job? So I had this dilemma of, didn't know what to do, really. I had 2 job offers, and they were great jobs. So I took the job at Gordonston. And again, it's one of those life-changing moments that you think to yourself, gosh. So I had 9 years at Gordonston that I really loved. It was fantastic. Great school, great environment. And it introduced me into civilian life that I didn't really, I wasn't prepared for, and a business life of an independent school. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then after 9 years, as life goes through you, I got divorced, and I decided that I needed to change. I needed something to get, for me personally and my ex-wife, to move on. I needed to realistically move.
Where was that school?
It was up in Lossiemouth, up in north of Scotland. And I made a decision that I was going to, I had the opportunity at that point to make that decision to do something I always wanted to do. And I applied to the police. And I applied to I think it was the Cambridge and 2 other forces, I can't remember. I didn't apply to Norfolk Constabulary, but Cambridge weren't recruiting at the time. They sent my application to the Norfolk Constabulary, who then invited me. I took the test. And about 6 months later, I got the offer of becoming a police constable. And I moved down here in, oh my gosh, 2000 must have been 2002. I came to the Norfolk Constabulary, didn't know where I was coming, no idea of what Norfolk. I remember at my interview, the guy said to me, "Do you know anything about Norfolk?" And I said, "No, I'm going to be really honest with you. No." He says, "Do you know who the chief constable is?" And I says, "I do, because I looked at the board as I came into the headquarters." And I remember the lady said to me, she says, "Well, if you hadn't been so honest, Warren, you probably wouldn't have got the offer of employment." And I went, "Well, thank you." So I joined the police force, and I was an officer in Mile Cross, which was at that time the 3rd most deprived area in the United Kingdom.
Wow, Christ, really?
And again, I'd never regretted it. It was a great time. I think and I've said to you in the past, if I'm really honest with myself, and it takes a time to come to be honest with yourself. I was never really a very good police officer in that I had too much life experience. Whereas at the time, as pointed out to me by my inspector at the time, I wasn't going to destroy his arrest figures.
So by that, I take it you mean you were going too easy on people.
Yeah,
I guess.
I think as a police officer, I think the worst thing is you are there to apply the law. You're not there to. And again, this is my own personal opinion, so don't chastise me if I'm wrong here. But I think common sense and what comes with age is not there to apply. And I understand that in the respect that. The police is accountable to the general public for the actions that they take. If they turn their blind eye to something and something bad comes of that in the later date, then who is to blame?
Yeah, absolutely.
The officer that turned his blind eye. But common sense and that sort of thing shouldn't get in. But you're just part of the process. You're there to apply the law to what somebody's done and arrest them. And then somebody else makes the decision whether it's it's worthy of further prosecution.
I think obviously they get a lot of bad press, and they take a lot of shit. But I don't think I'm alone in thinking they have a hard time from all angles. They can never be right, never be wrong.
No, unfortunately, the police service is the only emergency service you don't want to see appearing at your door, do you?
Yeah. So
I left. I then
was it just that role that you had throughout your time?
I did my probationary period at Mile Cross, and then come the end of my probationary period, I just into my normal service. I decided that it wasn't really the career for me. With a little bit of help of the inspector that I worked for, he advised me that it maybe wasn't the career choice I needed, and so I decided to I left, and I fell into a job in a company called Carbon Aqua, and who moved into another name called Indigo Swan with Emily, and then later with James and the crew that was done there.
And still about today.
And still about today. I was speaking to James and that last week at the business thing, and I did that for, I think I was there for 9 years. So and we built the myself and Emily, who were the founders of I worked for Emily, so I can't class myself as a founder. So we started Indigo Swan, and it was a discussion we had about energy procurement, and we took that on and started building that side. And then Emily bought it out from Carbon Aqua and formed Indigo Swan. And then we built that to about 14 people. And then I think in 2000, would it be 2000 and, oh my gosh, 14. Yeah. It was probably a very difficult decision for Emily, but she made me redundant. And I suppose in many respects, it was the best thing she could ever have done for me. I probably didn't agree with her at the time. but these things in life are there to spur you on. And people ask me, often get asked, what are why did you start Birchwood Energy? And that was the reason. I didn't. There are three reasons. I always go to my fingers for these reasons. I don't know why, but it always means something. Somebody said to me, why? And I says, well, firstly, I never, ever, ever want to be made to feel like I did on that day that I got made redundant. And this will probably reverberate with people that have been made redundant. I couldn't get over that. The second one was I am good at what I do, and no matter what somebody tells me in the first part of that, I'm still good at what I do. And then the third most important thing is I had a mortgage to pay.
Yeah.
So I gave myself, so starting your own business is never easy. It's never the right time. You'd never enough money. But the most important thing is that Sarah, my partner, she decided, she said to me, go for it, Warren. And she gave me a backing. And that's all you ever need. As long as you've got the backing of the people at home. You know?
I've heard it time and time again from people sitting there, and myself included, most people who start their business have perhaps hankered to or wanted to for a long while, but there has to be some catalyst that sets it off, and it's either being made redundant or losing a job or just basically not having any other option. But equally, there has to be a comfort blanket to give you the courage to take those steps, and presumably you got paid some sort of redundancy. But if you don't have that, then very often these opportunities don't take off. And it's that fear from giving up a paycheck to just starting on your own. Really.
I think from my perspective, I'd never wanted to do. I'd never had an inkling, or I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't class myself as an entrepreneur. I'm not I didn't think that I ever had it in me to start my own business and do it myself. I'd always enjoyed the cossative nature of being employed, being, like you say, having that security of a monthly paycheck. And I never thought that I was an out and out leader of a group of people. Somebody stands on the edge of it and leads them in the way that he wants them to go. I'd always thought that I was more of a person that is in the middle of the group and influence the people, and then they went in the general direction that I wanted it to go in.
Yeah.
But as I said, if I was to be honest with you, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. 11 years on, Birchwood's still going. Don't get me wrong, I still, it's not been easy.
That's something else. It never is easy.
No.
And people who aren't in business will never understand, because it is like, people taking chunks of you from every direction sometimes. But equally, there are, benefits, of course, and they are, usually a bit more flexible with time. Can be flexible with everything, really, and how many hours you want to do is your own choice. And
I took the decision when I first started the business that I didn't want to be huge. I didn't want to employ too many people. I just did. I wanted it, and then maybe that's a disadvantage and an advantage, because sometimes people look at a business and think, I've had it in the past where they've said, well, it's only you, Warren. What happens if you're not there? And so we caveat our business to that model in that respect. And I do have...
I do like the story you tell about you've got an accounts department.
Yeah.
You've got a...
Because
perhaps elaborate on that one for us.
So I worked. I got an invitation from a client to come and do a talk at it was a housing association. They were having all the directors of finance at this North of England finance housing association directors finance meeting. So I got invited up there to just talk to them about energy contracts. So from that, a company came to me and said, Warren, would you have a look at we're going out to tender for our energy contracts. Would you consider tendering for it? And I came back and I thought, oh God, it's just me. I do have a lady that does all the stuff I'm shit at, and she's really good at that because I'm shit at a lot of things. But she and I was thinking, I don't know what to do. And I spoke to a friend of mine. I'm still in BNI, which we do. A chap called Neil Foley. You know Neil. And I was explaining the predicament or my thoughts, and he says, Warren, change your mindset. And I says, what do you mean? He says, you've got to change your mindset here, because if you go into that meeting with that thought or approach that tender with that thought, you're not going to win it. He says, you may be, he says, do you have an accounts department? Do you has somebody that does your accounts? And I went, well, in actual fact, as a, can't remember his name now. Gosh, was he downstairs?
Chris Fine.
Chris Fines of JHW, he does my accounts. He says, so effectively, you have an accounts department. Oh, well, yeah, I suppose I do. He says, who does your IT? And I says, well, it's all done by a company called NetAds at the moment. And he says, well, there you got an IT department. Who does your marketing? And there was a lady called Bex from Smash Marketing. She does my marketing. Well, you've got a marketing department. And I thought to myself from that point, wow, yes. He says, so you may be a lone worker, but you do not work alone. And he says, it's just a different business model, Warren. And it's very much today's business model in the fact that, you know, small businesses haven't got the money or don't want to employ people. So they give it to people that are very good at what they do. And I'm very lucky. That,
well, do what you're good at.
Exactly
in a nutshell, isn't it? Do what you're good at, and you're good at the contract side of it and the sourcing suppliers and stuff. So, yeah, very much agree with that motto. And I think a lot of businesses could learn from that as well, because very often they take on too much. They take on too much staff, and before you know it, they're in problems, and then they have to let go of the staff, and it's that.
Well, having been employed before, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find the right employees, don't you? It's easier to get rid of somebody that hasn't done a good job with you, that's not employed by you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So some of your highlights now over those years, and are there any stories about how you've really helped companies, or money you've saved them? Anything stand out as being a real sort of success story?
I suppose there are a number. I can pull to mind one straight away. I did some work for the YMCA in London, and we'd done some. It's the oldest YMCA in the world, and we still are contracted via them. And a chap called Alan at the time was their director of facilities, and we were looking at his energy contracts and his energy bills, and we noticed that there was an anomaly within one of his bills. In actual fact, he was paying for the wrong. They had a building, and effectively the hotel had taken over the top bit, and they looked after the bottom bit, but they weren't getting their billing was incorrect. So we looked at that and found some errors within the billing, and got him £142,000 rebate.
Wow.
But there is a sideline to this, and Alan, if you're ever listening to this, I don't mean to pin it out, but it just shows you the complexities of business environment. In that fact, we did a tender for him a year later, and we lost the tender because our price was about £140 more expensive than the other one.
Wow. Wow.
But saying that, a year later he came back to us.
It's just wild that it can fluctuate that much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between the suppliers. And again, when I used to touch on energy, I used to say, look, and I don't know, you're probably going to tell me different, but I used to sell it in such a way as, look, we're just going to get you all the prices from Allwick. So, there's no advantage to going direct or anything, because these are the prices from them. So how can it vary that much, I guess? And how?
Well, I think a lot of the suppliers, they will buy in chunks of energy. So, for example, Scottish Power at the moment are the most competitive with their pricing. They have their contracts don't traditionally run for 12 months. Depending when you're contracting, they'll run for 14 months, 15 months, because they bought a chunk of energy for that period of time. Yeah. So if it's say they bought 18 months worth of energy, and then you dip into that contract maybe 4 months into it, they will only give you either that that period of time's contract, or 1, 2 or 3 years equivalents of it. So they will have bought that energy at a price that they before it's gone to market.
Got it.
And then some suppliers will then price on the daily market, so that because the price of gas.
But surely if there's two brokers, for example, they would both have the same price?
You'd like to think that they would.
Yeah.
It depends on a number of factors. What the supplier, how much business the broker is putting with that supplier.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What their relationship is with the supplier. Also, what the supplier is making out of it as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can't work.
Again, and the commission that is going to the client, our overheads are minimal. And that essentially that helps us keep the base price of what we offer to the client low and competitive.
Would you be prepared to say a sort of ballpark figure of how many clients or properties you look after or buildings?
So currently we've got a client base of 762 clients.
Wow.
And those are made up of, I work with like a news agency, Sheringham, to a housing association in South Wales.
And are you suggesting that some of those 700 and whatever it was could have multiple?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Like the Housing Association in Wales probably has a portfolio of properties ranging from, I think it's about if I remember correct, 340 odd at the moment. Wow. So we manage a whole portfolio of supplies. And that takes over everything from the introduction of new supplies, getting meters installed, to making sure that their billing is correct, that they're being billed at the relevant VAT there and all that sort of stuff. And the house associations are really interesting people to talk to because and the client, because the demands of a house association, they have to be very transparent with their pricing. Because obviously they're passing that cost back to the residents of the accommodation. So and they're very and they like to be very proactive with their buying strategies, which is great for us because it gives us an opportunity to really help and secure prices when they're very competitive. And and a lot of our clients are very open to that. We set parameters. When we engage with a client, we'll speak to them. Where are you looking to have your pricing in the future? So that, and they may say, well, our annual spend is about £10,000. So anything around, a tolerance of 12 to 8. If prices, unit rates change, that we can dip down that in the future. You must give us a shout.
Are you? On the ball, well, I guess you have to be on the ball with, where you think the market's going. Are you often asked that advice on, what do you think it's doing next month, next year, next 3 years,
Yeah, we're off. That if I had £1 for every per time that question is asked us from a client, I wouldn't be doing the job.
How do you normally answer it?
We normally answer it in the and bat it back to them really in that it's unquantifiable.
My usual phrase is crystal ball. I'm afraid I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I'm often asked, where's technology going with AI and stuff like that, or in the property world, it's where's the property market going? Of course, and it's always, I don't have a crystal ball, but this is my opinion. Based on God knows how many years experience, but I think you're going to be more experienced than most, I'm sure. So.
I think it's important when we answer that question to be as frank and as honest as possible, and the phrase crystal ball does come out, but there are elements within the pricing of energy contracts that is pretty fixed in that, and because the electricity prices are dictated to by the price of gas. And the supply and demand of gas will always, as I said, will always dictate to the price of the electricity, because most of our generation of electricity is through gas-fired power stations. The UK is trying to divulge into alternative power supplies, so sources like wind, solar, nuclear, but those need massive investment. So eventually. So at the moment, we're stuck in the war in the Ukraine has affected the price of gas. That's hence the energy crisis a couple of years ago, where prices went from 20 odd p a unit rate to at one point I know we were looking at £1 a unit rate. which was horrendous for people. And I think the knock-on effect from that is still reverberating through the energy market and clients, because obviously historically they were paying inordinate amounts for their electricity and their gas, and they still have that debt to clear. But so the UK's demand on the gas changed in that predominantly we were supplied through Gazprom and the Russian gas through the Ukraine. But obviously when it was decided that they didn't want to be reliant on that, alternative sources of gas had to be sourced. Europe is still heavily dependent on Russian gas because they don't have the infrastructure at the moment to source it elsewhere. But they are slowly coming off that.
Do you think there's any threats future-wise to your industry with, I don't know, legislation or new technology? I don't know. Have you thought of anything that might come about? They might just invent some battery that, you know, supply a whole city or something like that. Anything that you're aware of in the future that's...
Electricity and gas prices are all... people are always going to need a supply contract.
Well, unless they invent this battery.
And then unless they invent the battery. Wind generations, solar are fantastic, but the technology is not quite there yet for the storage of that electricity that is generated. They are making better solutions, but a lot of the generation of those electricity has to be used straight away. So it doesn't have a massive influence on the UK energy market at the moment. It does, but it doesn't have a massive influx. Technology is moving on very quickly, but the money to invest in it isn't there really. I mean, the government announced the other day, yesterday, there was a £17 billion investment in the new nuclear power station, but that's not likely to come online until the 2040s. You know, the Hickley Point won't come online until 2031. So in the meantime, we're still stuck with the generating capacity that we have.
Yeah, if it was China, it would be online by next year, wouldn't it?
And it would absolutely. But China uses a lot of coal. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. So I don't know, do you think AI is going to affect things at all with, I don't know, someone brings out some tool to do your job for you?
It's interesting because I had an interesting conversation with somebody else the other day, and I think the days of our industry are we have to move with technology, don't we, and make it more automated. You do have the comparison websites online, but they don't. The problem with the online, from my perspective, is that they're not. They don't react. They're not very reactive, because where we ask for prices. When we engage with a client and we do a tender process, we will set a specific date, and we'll go to our account managers and ask for a price on that date to present the report. So those prices are taken from the daily market of that day, and prices do move up and down every day. So having a tool that is going to interact, I don't suppose it's a million miles away.
Well, also it's down to the company itself to input the figures, to gather the information, to, you know, run the numbers, if you like, and do that for every single contract. You know, and I guess that's where you come in, to take that all away from them.
I think one of the most common arguments or discussions we have with clients is that, you know, you speak to a client and they'll say, well, I can do this myself. I can go to the energy supplier and get a price. And yes, you can. There's no denying that. But loyalty in this day and age costs nothing. I don't think there is any loyalty staying with you don't get a bonus. If say you're with, I don't know, any of the suppliers, and you go to your existing supplier and ask for a renewal price, there's no loyalty with them.
No.
And 9 times out of 10, I'd say, if you then get your renewal price, and we often say to the client, give us your renewal price, we'll put it in the report. You know, if it's a good price, good luck to you, take it.
Yeah.
If it's not, let's have a look for you. And like we got engaged with a client today, they've had their renewal offer, and I said to him, well, send me your renewal price. And he went, why? And I said, well, I can be honest with you, if I can't beat it, you might as well take it. If we can't get a better price than that, take it. And he was quite surprised at that reaction in the fact that we openly encourage you to let us know what you've been offered.
So, don't see any immediate threats on the horizon, but
I think there's always a threat on the horizon.
What's the goal with the business? Do you think it's obviously not ready to retire yet?
No,
I know you're old, but you're not that old. Do you think it will ever be a question of selling, or?
No, I don't think so. I've had that conversation with the missus actually recently, and she says, "You're not looking to retire, are you, Warren?"
I don't mean now. I mean like 5 years.
No,
10 years.
I think I've probably got another good 10 years. Doing what I'm doing,
and it's something you can do as you've proven when we've been away in the Maldives, feet up, tapping away on your keyboard, doing energy contracts. But
don't tell people that, because I think I'm there all the time. No, I'm very lucky in the fact that the job has afforded me the time and the lifestyle that I enjoy. But married with the fact that 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, sometimes I can be sitting in my office working away.
I will contest. We've been away on holiday, and he has been working away 2 or 3 times. So.
And the missus is in the other room watching some shite TV or something like that. Yeah. But she doesn't moan about that anymore, because it used to be when I was employed. Obviously, she'd look at the clock at 7 o'clock at night and say, "Where are you?" "Well, I'm working." "Warren, you don't get paid at 7 o'clock at night." Okay.
Well, I tend to disagree with that. If you're in business, then you're working 20,
Yeah.
If it needs doing, it needs doing, doesn't it?
But
no one else is going to do it for
I think 10 years is, I enjoy, the problem I've got, Danny, and yourself, I like working.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky in that after, 40 odd, 50 odd years in working, 40 odd years, I've found a job that I really love doing.
And equally, and many people have agreed with me in that chair, is retirement is pretty much from experience the end. As soon as people utter those words or start shouting about, "I'm retired," I'm going to take up golf, they're no longer with us, or they're in ill health, and I think that is just a nasty swear word as far as I'm concerned. Retirement.
I think again, if you manage your workload really well, you can still have those couple of hours on the golf course.
Yeah.
I did have a client that once that was introduced to me that didn't like the fact that I was telling him I was going to play golf, and it didn't come to me because I didn't want. I was going to go and play golf.
Well, I guess he was probably just jealous and stuck in a sweaty office with. You're working. The golf course is working, so yeah.
Well, Chris says it's networking.
Yeah, it is. So, what else can we touch on? We've done any bad points? What's any worrying points over the last few years? I know you had an issue perhaps a couple of years ago, wasn't it, with the what the government did.
COVID was a bad point for us, really, because effectively, come March 21, wasn't it? 22, 20? Bloody hell. Whatever date it was, effectively the energy market, it was, I always remember, it was like standing on the edge of a cliff and going like that, because the world just stopped. And I think effectively after that date, and for almost 8 months, we stopped working. People weren't looking at their energy contracts. I always remember for the first 3 or 4 months after COVID started, there was that transition period where people were starting to work from home, and until that they had the setup from working from home, there was nobody answering emails, nobody answering telephone calls, and justifiably so, because it was the world changed, or the UK business market changed overnight. It took a good. Well, I'd say I still think people are having the ramifications from COVID now within their businesses, and especially the leisure industry has changed immeasurably. It has affected them massively, and to the extent, even though the suppliers have changed their attitude towards the leisure industry, and the fact that They look carefully at their credit rating now. Some industry sectors and some suppliers, they won't touch the leisure industry because they're inherent with, that sort of, will they be here tomorrow? And so placing business for the leisure industry, pubs and that sort of thing, has become a little bit more difficult. And we're endlessly having conversations with clients. They're finding that they're having to pay a premium to place an energy contract, and that's just because of the risk that is associated. Because a lot of people don't understand that when an energy contract is taken out, the supplier will look at their risk element to that contract. Because effectively, if you go a 12-month contract, they're buying that energy for 12 months. And the risk to their bank balance, their portfolio it has to be measured, and that risk will be built into the energy contract in some way.
It's actually very similar to what we do. We'll put in a leased line, but we get it from our supplier at a set price for a set period of time.
Yeah.
And if that client goes bust, then we're left with the bill for that lease line or that connection or that whatever it may be. So it's not dissimilar, and many of our customers, why do you want to tie us into a contract? It's to get you a better rate, because we get a better rate the longer we can make that contract. If you don't want that better rate, fine, but it's not often the business's fault when they're trying to set pricing for such time. But equally, we have to account for our risk, as I'm sure the energy suppliers do. So they have to weigh up that business, and unfortunately, if it is hospitality in a pub or something like that, they're going to look at that closer, because there are, quite frankly, statistically more risk of that business failing. So
the energy suppliers are becoming more and more astute with their buying and their contracts as well, because there has always been this element of called take or pay policies within an energy contract. And that traditionally used to be with the higher users of electricity or gas. And the take or pay policy, in that when you enter into a contract, they usually base it upon your estimated annual consumption. Say you use 100,000 kilowatts a year. So the energy supplier will go out and buy that electricity, because the supplier who you contract with, either E.ON, Empower, Scottish Hydro, they are not the actual generators of the electricity. So effectively, they're just salespeople because they buy their electricity from the generators. They're just a front office for selling. So they bought this electricity, but what they tend to do nowadays for the some more and more contracts is have a take or pay policy, in that, so you bought your 100,000 kilowatts of electricity, but then they build into the contract a tolerance. So 20% above or 20% below, you can go up to 20% above consumption over a year period, and you can go 20% below. Any further than that, the supplier will then add a premium to your unit rate, because they're effectively having to go out and buy extra, or they've got excess power that they've then got to redistribute. So those, when I'm speaking to clients who mention we might be moving out of this premises, or we might be changing the premises, that's one of the things that we try to encourage them to look in and factor in. Some suppliers, and again, you can get rid of those tolerances, but there is a premium, because again, it's adding to the risk of the energy contract.
So a typical client approaches you, what's the process? What's the involvement for them? Can they just literally dump it on you, and you just, for happily ever after, look after that and make sure that client is always paying the best price?
So like today we had an inquiry from a company out in Wyndham, and I rang him when I was on my way here, and we tried to make it in as less intrusive as possible, because the more the client has to do, the more of a pain it becomes to them. So we have to have what is known as a letter of authority, and that allows us as a third party to speak to the suppliers on their behalf. And a lot of third parties, I think maybe even you do when you're approaching. So we send them that via email, and we also ask them for a copy of an invoice, so that one, we get to know what they're currently paying, because our reports are based upon shows what they're currently paying, and then compares everything against that. And then we try. That's it. our letter of authority will allow us to go to the supplier and gather in the data from the supplier about how much they're using, when their contract ends, and any other particulars that might be within that contract. And then once we've gone through that data mining little exercise, it usually takes about 5 days. We then, if it's in the window for tendering, we'll tender it, send out the tender requests on a preset date that's agreeable with the client, and then just provide the report on that day. And that's essentially where we stop. Often I get criticised, not criticised, but I feel guilty because we don't chase a client. Once we've given them the information, we will send an email maybe a week later, because the last thing they want to do is be hassled into making an instant decision. We provide the report with the fact that chat prices do change, and they may well change when it comes to contracting, but generally they're there or thereabouts. So.
And who are you looking for? Who can we look out for? Who can we introduce you to? Who do you think would be someone you can take all that hassle away from?
Well, anybody that finds it difficult that's got an energy contract, they're not managing really. We're not saying that you're going to move all the time, but having the information in front of you about where prices are makes you make a better business decision, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So anybody, I know this sounds very blasé answer, but anybody that really has an energy contract, as I said, be it your news agency, and sharing them to, if you've got multiple sites, we take the hassle out of managing that portfolio for you.
Or I guess people, accountants, if they're seeing their clients with very high bills, maybe financial directors, facilities management. Yeah. Chris
downstairs is very good at that. He's looking at the balance sheets of all of his clients all the time, and part of his business practice is to look after his clients. And the amount of introductions we get from him is fantastic.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and plus the fact we've got a good client base that. It's like this morning we got a referral from an existing client, and that means more to me than anything, where somebody you've done a good job for.
Absolutely, is singing your praises, yeah. Well, Warren, I think we've touched on everything, unless you want to add anything, but I can't think of anything.
No,
I've just
I found myself sitting there like this time. Am I on an executive thing?
Extracted every bit of information we can from you, but no, it's been fascinating. And I hope the listeners have found it equally as fascinating. But thank you for coming in, mate.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers.
Well done.
The Norfolk Business Show with Danny Snelling. Sponsored by MT Comms.
Just a quick word from me. Absolutely thrilled with the response and feedback we've had so far. It really has been so positive. We're going to continue with it. I do just need to ask you all, please, just to take that 1 second to click the subscribe, like, follow button, share them. Just do something for me, because we're never going to be monetized. We're not going to make money from this show, and that's not our intention. We're a local Norfolk show, so we're never going to get those worldwide viewing figures that need to monetize channels. It's not about that. We genuinely are just trying to give back to the business community in Norfolk. So please do that favour for me. It will just increase the visibility of those guests we have on the show, so they get more impact from it. And who knows, if you're a future guest, then you'll get the benefit of that as well. So please do that for me. Obviously, we're sponsoring it from MT Comms. Please do keep us in mind if we can help with anything IT related. Office 365 support, cybersecurity, 365, that sort of thing. We also do telecoms, mobile, CCTV. There's loads of stuff we do. Just reach out to us and ask us if you can help with anything. Thank you, guys.